These are 6 killers whose alibis fell apart in seconds. Scott Peterson. On the morning of December 24, 2002, Scott Peterson told his wife Lossie he was driving to Berkeley Marina to go fishing. Lossie was 27 years old and 8 months pregnant with their first son. That evening, Scott called her family and said she was missing. He told police he had been fishing alone, 90 miles from their Modesto home. The story sounded simple, but Scott had told a different version of his day to several other people. Lossie's sister Amy had cut Scott's hair the day before. He told her he was planning to golf on Christmas Eve. Lossie's stepfather was told the same thing over the phone that morning. When Lossie's mother called the house that night, Scott told neighbors he had been golfing. Then police arrived. Now the story was fishing. Scott's own father took the stand at trial. He had spoken with Scott between noon and 2 p.m. on December 24th. Scott never mentioned going fishing. His father also testified he did not know his son owned a boat. The fishing license had been purchased 4 days earlier. It was a freshwater license. The tackle inside the boat was freshwater tackle. Berkeley Marina is saltwater. Scott claimed he was fishing for sturgeon, but could not tell police what bait he had used. Weeks before the disappearance, Scott had searched online for deep water currents in San Francisco Bay. He had also researched tides in specific locations in the bay. He had paid cash for the boat. He had not registered it. His wife had never seen it. 4 months later, in April 2003, the body of Lossie Peterson washed ashore on the east side of San Francisco Bay. The body of her unborn son Connor washed up the next day. Both were found within a few miles of Berkeley Marina. What Scott didn't know was that police had already been following him. On April 18th, officers found him at a golf course in San Diego, hours from the Mexican border. His hair and goatee had been dyed blonde. In the car, they found $15,000 in cash, his brother's ID card, 4 cell phones, camping gear, and a map to the home of his girlfriend Amber Fry. In 2004, Scott Peterson was convicted of first-degree murder for Lossie and second-degree murder for Connor. He was sentenced to death. In 2021, the sentence was reduced to life in prison without parole. He is currently held at Mule Creek State Prison in California. Cameron Brown. On November 8, 2000, Cameron Brown took his 4-year-old daughter Lauren to Inspiration Point in Rancho Palos Verdes, California. It was a 120-foot sea cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Cameron was 38 years old and worked as a baggage handler for American Airlines. That afternoon, he called 911 and said Lauren had tripped and fallen over the edge while running. The ocean was filled with jagged rocks. The story collapsed almost immediately. Lauren's mother, Sarah Keymerer, was a British citizen. When she had become pregnant, Cameron had pressured her to have an abortion. After she refused, he had tried to have her deported. For the first 3 years of Lauren's life, Cameron never visited her. He only began visits after the court ordered him to pay $1,000 a month in child support. In 4 years, he saw his daughter 12 times. One witness later testified that Cameron had told him it would be nice to get rid of Lauren to stop the child support payments. Another witness said Cameron had also asked how much it would cost to hire someone to hurt his ex-wife. On the morning Lauren died, she called her mother from school, crying. She said she did not want to go with her father. Her mother tried to leave work early to pick her up. Cameron arrived first. At trial, a biomechanics expert calculated how fast a 4-year-old child would need to run to land where Lauren's body was found, deep in the water beyond the rocks. The answer was that no 4-year-old could run that fast. For her body to land in that location, she had to have been thrown. The prosecution also played phone records. Cameron and Sarah had spoken for months before the death. Cameron had complained repeatedly about the child support. His financial records showed he was struggling. Cameron was charged with first-degree murder and the special circumstances of murder for financial gain and lying in wait. His first trial ended with a hung jury in 2006. His second trial ended the same way in 2009. 8 jurors voted for second-degree murder. The rest split between first-degree and manslaughter. In May 2015, after 15 years and a new witness, the third jury convicted him of first-degree murder. Because the jury also found he killed for financial gain and lying in wait, he faced the mandatory sentence of life without parole. He received it on September 18, 2015. Neil Entwistle. Between January 10th and January 20th, 2006, English computer engineer Entwistle rented a 4-bedroom colonial house in Hopkinton, Massachusetts. He lived there with his American wife Rachel, who was 27, and their 9-month-old daughter Lillian. The family had moved from England 6 months earlier. Neil had no job. They were thousands of dollars in debt. On January 22nd, Rachel's family had not heard from them in 2 days. Police did a welfare check. They found Rachel and Lillian in the master bedroom, shot dead. A single .22 caliber bullet had passed through Lillian's body and into Rachel's chest. Neil was not in the house. Later that day, police traced him to his parents' home in Worksop, England. They called him. Neil gave them his alibi. He said he had left the house on the morning of January 20th to run errands. When he returned around 11 a.m., he found his wife and daughter already dead. He said he was so distraught he decided to kill himself. He tried to use a knife, but could not. He then drove an hour south to his father-in-law, Joseph Matarasso's house in Carver, Massachusetts, to get a .22 caliber handgun. The house was locked. He could not get inside. So instead, he said, he drove to Logan International Airport and bought a one-way ticket to London. The ticket was purchased at 5 a.m. on January 21st. That meant Neil had waited 18 hours after discovering his family dead. He had never called police. He had never called Rachel's family. He had not alerted anyone at all. Police then tested Joseph Matarasso's .22 caliber revolver. The firearm had DNA from both Neil Entwistle and Rachel Entwistle on it. It matched the ballistics from the crime scene. Investigators also recovered Neil's laptop from the Hopkinton house. On the computer, they found his browsing history. In the weeks before the murders, Neil had been posting on adult websites, running online financial scams, and searching for information on how to kill someone with a knife. He had also written drafts of letters in which he pitched the exclusive story of his wife's murder to the highest bidder. On February 9, 2006, Neil was arrested on a London Underground train at Royal Oak Station. He initially refused extradition. He later agreed. In 2008, he was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder. He is serving life without parole at Old Colony Correctional Center in Bridgewater, Massachusetts. Drew Peterson. Drew Peterson was a police sergeant in Bolingbrook, Illinois. On March 1, 2004, his ex-wife Kathleen Savio was found dead in her bathtub. The tub was dry. Her hair was wet. There was a deep cut on the back of her head. She was 40 years old. Their divorce had been finalized 5 months earlier. The coroner ruled it an accidental drowning. Drew had an alibi. His new girlfriend, 19-year-old Stacy Cales, told police Drew was with her the entire night. Kathleen had predicted her own death. In a 2002 petition for protective order, she wrote that Drew wanted her dead and would burn the house down to shut her up. She had also told the Bolingbrook police chief, Drew's colleague, that if anything happened to her, it would be because Drew killed her. Nobody listened. The case was closed. 3 years later, on October 28, 2007, Stacy Peterson vanished. She was 23. She has never been found. Drew told investigators Stacy had left him for another man, but before she disappeared, Stacy had been telling other people something else. She had told Reverend Neil Shorey, a pastor at her church, that on the night Kathleen died, she had woken up at 3 a.m. and Drew was not in bed. Hours later, in the early morning, she had seen him by the washing machine in dark clothing. He was emptying the contents of a large bag and washing his own clothes. Stacy said Drew had later confessed to her that he had killed Kathleen and staged the bathtub scene. He had taught her exactly what to say to police if they asked. Stacy had also contacted a divorce lawyer shortly before her disappearance. She asked if her knowledge of Kathleen's murder could be used as leverage. After Stacy disappeared, Illinois exhumed Kathleen's body. A second autopsy found bruises and injuries consistent with a struggle. The death was reclassified as homicide, staged to look like an accident. In 2012, Drew Peterson was convicted of Kathleen's murder and sentenced to 38 years. While in prison, he was recorded trying to hire another inmate to murder the lead prosecutor. He received an additional 40 years for solicitation. Stacy Peterson is still missing. Drew has never been charged in her case. He will be eligible for parole in his 90s, which means he will die in prison. He is currently held at Menard Correctional Center in Illinois. Susan Smith. On the night of October 25, 1994, 23-year-old Susan Smith ran to a house in Union, South Carolina, screaming for help. She told the couple inside that a black man had just carjacked her at a red light. Her 2 sons, 3-year-old Michael and 14-month-old Alexander, were still strapped in the back seat when the man drove off. For 9 days, she pleaded on national television for their safe return. Her husband David stood next to her. The entire country watched. The alibi fell apart because of a traffic light. Susan said the carjacking happened at an intersection in Monarch, South Carolina, at 8:35 p.m. She said the light had turned red and she had stopped. She said no other cars were at the intersection. Investigators checked the traffic light. The light was sensor-activated. It only turned red when another vehicle was waiting on the cross street to trigger the sensor. If Susan had truly stopped at a red light, there had to have been another car there. But she was adamant that there were no other cars. Both things could not be true. There were other problems. Carjackers usually want the car, not the children. There was no reason to let Susan out, but keep the boys. And the description Susan gave of the black carjacker changed over the 9 days. Under questioning, Susan confessed. She had driven to the boat ramp at John D. Long Lake. She had strapped her 2 sons into their car seats. She had put the Mazda Protege in drive. She had stepped out. The car rolled down the ramp and into the water. Investigators later recreated the scene with cameras inside the car. The vehicle floated on the surface for 6 full minutes before it sank. Water poured in slowly through the vents. Both children were conscious. The bodies were later found hanging upside down in their car seats. The motive came from a letter. Susan had been having an affair with Tom Findlay, the son of her wealthy boss. 1 week before the murders, Tom had sent her a letter saying he could not be with her because he did not want to raise children. In July 1995, Susan Smith was convicted of 2 counts of murder and sentenced to life in prison. In November 2024, she applied for parole after 30 years. She was unanimously denied. She remains at Leith Correctional Institution in South Carolina. Chris Coleman. Chris Coleman had been planning his alibi for months. He was 32 years old, a bodyguard for evangelist Joyce Meyer. He earned $100,000 a year. He lived in the quiet suburb of Columbia, Illinois, with his wife Sherry, their 11-year-old son Garrett, and their 9-year-old son Gavin. He was also having an affair with a woman in Florida named Tara Lintz, who had been Sherry's high school friend. In November 2008, Chris reported to Columbia police that an anonymous email had threatened his family. The stalker said he would hurt the family if Chris did not quit his job with Joyce Meyer. In January and April of 2009, more typed threats arrived in the mailbox. Chris asked his neighbor, a detective, to install security cameras. The neighbor agreed. Cameras were aimed at Chris's house 24 hours a day. On May 5, 2009, at 5:30 a.m., Chris left his house to drive to his gym in St. Louis County. He called Sherry. He texted her from the gym. He called her on the way home. She did not answer. Chris called his neighbor, the detective, and asked him to check the house. The detective found a basement window open. Inside, he found red spray-painted graffiti on the walls, reading, "I am always watching. You have paid and punished." He found Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin in their beds, strangled with a cord. Chris's alibi began falling apart within hours. The threatening emails from November were traced by the FBI. The IP address came from Chris's own laptop at his workplace. A handwriting expert examined the red graffiti on the walls. It matched Chris's handwriting. His credit card records showed that in the weeks before the murders, he had purchased red spray paint in the exact color used at the scene. The medical examiner determined that Sherry and both boys had been dead since between 11 p.m. on May 4th and 3 a.m. On May 5th, at least 2.5 hours before Chris left for the gym, the neighbor's security cameras confirmed the rest. No one had entered or exited the house after Chris left. There was no stalker. Cell phone tracking also showed Chris had taken an unusual longer route home that morning. Police searched that route. They never found what he had dumped. Tara Lintz told investigators Chris had told her the night before the murders that he would be serving Sherry with divorce papers the next day. In May 2011, Chris Coleman was convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder. He received life without parole. He is held at Menard Correctional Center in Illinois. If you like this video, subscribe for similar ones.